You want to know the truth? When someone with an avoidant attachment style is actually serious about you, they don't use words. They shift their entire pattern. This isn't about sweet talk or promises. It's about the one moment when their fear finally takes a back seat and you become the thing they choose, not run from. If you've been waiting, confused, heartbroken, or questioning your worth, this is the clarity you've been needing. Let's cut to it. Dating an avoidant can feel like walking barefoot through emotional landmines. One moment, they're into you. The next, cold, distant, and gone. You tell yourself stories. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm too much. But when an avoidant is truly serious about you, you won't have to beg for their presence. You'll feel it. You'll see it. You'll finally stop questioning your damn sanity. So why watch this entire speech? Because if you miss the signs, you'll stay stuck in limbo, loving someone who keeps one foot out the door. But if you catch what I'm about to tell you, you'll know for sure if they're in or if it's time for you to walk away. One of the most misunderstood moments in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is the first time they decide to open up. And I don't mean surface-level chit-chat. I'm talking about real, unfiltered, and uncomfortable vulnerability. Now, here's the kicker. When an avoidant is truly serious about you, they won't suddenly become a master communicator or pour their heart out in poetic, perfectly timed monologues. No, what actually happens is way more subtle and honestly kind of messy. They'll fumble through their words. They'll avoid eye contact. They might even say something completely sideways or out of context, and it won't make sense until hours later. But if you're paying attention, really paying attention, you'll realize something huge is happening. This person who's built their life around emotional walls and silence is trying to let you in. Not because they're suddenly fixed, but because they're serious about you. Avoidants don't open up to feel better. They open up because you've become too important to shut out. That's the difference. You've reached a depth that scares them, and instead of shutting down like they used to, they try. And I promise you that word, try, is everything when you're dealing with someone who's never felt safe in emotional closeness. They might tell you something that sounds casual, like, I've never told anyone this before, or I don't know why I'm saying this right now, but what's happening underneath is enormous. Their nervous system is probably in overdrive. Their inner critic is screaming at them to retreat. And yet here they are, speaking anyway. That's what vulnerability looks like for them. It's not roses and declarations of love. It's quiet, awkward courage. It's the moment they let the armor slip, even for just a minute. And you've got to understand the cost of that moment for them is huge. It might seem small to you, a story about their childhood, a fear they have, a dream they gave up on years ago, but for them, it's a crack in the wall they swore they'd never let anyone through. And here's what you'll notice if you're really present. They'll often test the waters first. They'll say something small, maybe even insignificant, like a story from the past where they were hurt or disappointed. And then they wait, not for your reaction, but for your energy. They're hyper-aware of whether or not you'll judge them, dismiss them, or try to fix them. Because in their experience, vulnerability has always led to disconnection or shame. So when they offer you that first thread, how you respond tells them everything they need to know. Do you stay grounded? Do you hold space? Do you stay curious instead of reactive? Because if you do, you'll see something rare. They'll go a step deeper next time, and a step deeper after that. This isn't about being perfect or knowing what to say. It's about being safe enough for them to stay open, even when it terrifies them. Most avoidants learned very early that emotions weren't welcome. Maybe they had caregivers who punished them for being too sensitive. Maybe no one ever taught them how to name or process what they felt. So what did they do? They adapted. They survived. They built emotional independence so strong that even they forgot what intimacy could feel like. But when they finally decide they want more, not just space and freedom, but closeness, it shakes their entire system. They don't know the rules, they don't know the words, but if they're serious about you, they'll start rewriting all of it. And that first act of vulnerability is their way of saying, I'm terrified, but I trust you more than my fear. You won't always recognize it in the moment. Sometimes it looks like a late-night text that says, today was hard. Sometimes it's them bringing up something painful from their past and immediately brushing it off like it didn't matter. Sometimes it's them asking about your emotions, not because they're comfortable with it, but because they're trying to learn how to connect. The irony is, most people miss this moment entirely because it's not packaged the way they expect. We're used to associating love and intimacy with big romantic gestures, flowers, confessions, deep eye contact over dinner. But when it comes to avoidance, love shows up in quiet rebellion. Rebellion against their old self, against their survival strategies, against the voice in their head that says, don't you dare open up, you'll regret it. And if you're someone who's earned that moment, if you've been patient, grounded, consistent, you're not just witnessing their vulnerability, you're witnessing their transformation. They may not say the words, I'm falling for you, but when they tell you about the night they cried alone and didn't tell anyone, or the dream they still secretly hope to chase, or the way they were once betrayed and never really got over it, they are handing you the most guarded parts of themselves and praying you won't drop them. There comes a moment in every relationship with an avoidant where you're forced to confront a painful question. Am I chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught? For weeks, maybe even months, you find yourself doing all the emotional lifting, texting first, planning everything, making excuses for their silence, telling yourself they're just processing. You hold on because the connection feels real when you're together. But in the gaps between, the silence, the shutdowns, it starts to feel like you're loving them more than they're loving you. But when an avoidant is truly serious about you, something shifts. It doesn't look loud or dramatic, and you might miss it if you're still caught in the pain of the past. But it's unmistakable. They start showing up, and they do it without needing to be reminded, begged, or pulled in. No more breadcrumbs, no more guessing. They cross the distance on their own. You have to understand, for someone with an avoidant attachment style, showing up is not just about being physically present. It's an internal emotional risk. Avoidants value independence and distance not because they don't care, but because that's how they've survived. They learned, sometimes brutally early in life, that closeness equals vulnerability, and vulnerability often ended in rejection, abandonment, or criticism. So they adapted. They built a life where no one could get close enough to hurt them. So when that same person, the one who used to vanish when emotions got intense, the one who never initiated connection unless you reached out first, starts calling just to hear your voice, or texting you in the middle of the day without needing a reason, what you're witnessing is not just a new habit. You're witnessing a dismantling of an entire coping system they've used to stay safe their whole life. When avoidants show up for real, it's not because they've been pressured into it. It's because something inside of them, often against their own instincts, is leaning toward connection instead of escape. It's terrifying for them. It feels like walking into a room without armor, hoping no one notices the vulnerability they're carrying in their hands. They'll never tell you outright, I'm doing this because I'm changing. What they will do is start to take initiative. Maybe they offer to pick you up after work. Maybe they ask about your day. And not in a rushed, obligatory way, but with real curiosity. Maybe they show up to your friend's dinner party, even though social settings aren't their thing, because you matter more than their discomfort. You won't have to ask them to be there. They will begin to anticipate your needs in the smallest, quietest ways. And in doing so, they're trying to tell you something they don't yet have the emotional language for. I care about you more than I care about protecting myself. For most avoidants, being needed feels like pressure. But being chosen, now that's a game changer. When they start choosing to be present, to follow through, to keep their word, even when no one's watching, that's the evidence of seriousness. That's the moment they're saying, I want to be in this with you. Not because it's easy for them, not because they suddenly became emotionally fluent overnight, but because you've become a safe place in their world. And safe places make people brave. You may notice them reaching out after an argument instead of stonewalling you. You might see them prioritizing time together even when life gets chaotic. What used to feel like chasing suddenly becomes mutual effort, and you realize you're no longer carrying the weight of the relationship alone. And the most surprising part? When avoidants start showing up, they often do it quietly, like they're testing the waters of a new identity. They won't announce it. They won't even be sure how you'll receive it, but you'll feel the shift. It's in how they respond faster, how they offer comfort instead of pulling away, how they make space for your emotions, not just theirs. And these aren't dramatic transformations. They're small, deliberate acts of presence that feel incredibly big when you know where they came from. An avoidant showing up unprompted is not just about commitment, it's about emotional availability. It's about someone who has spent their life running from closeness, now deciding on their own to stand still, to stay, to participate, to make effort, to choose connection again and again, even when every cell in their body is screaming to retreat. Here's the truth most people miss when loving someone with an avoidant attachment style. Their fear doesn't magically vanish the moment they fall for you. In fact, when they begin to care deeply, when real intimacy starts to form, that's often when the fear intensifies. It's easy to assume that progress with them means they've conquered their demons, but that's not how it works. Fear, for the avoidant, is a long-term companion. It's not a switch they flip off. It's a voice in the back of their mind constantly whispering, "You're safer alone, don't get too close. If you need them, they'll let you down." So if you're waiting for the day their fear disappears entirely, you might miss what's even more powerful, the moment they start choosing you despite the fear again and again. For someone avoidant, vulnerability feels like exposure. It feels like handing over the most fragile parts of themselves to someone who could, in their mind, easily use it against them. So what happens when they fall for you? What happens when love starts to crack through the armor they've spent years building? Everything inside of them sounds the alarm. They might get anxious, irritable, emotionally distant. They might even sabotage, picking fights, shutting down, withdrawing, not because you've done something wrong, but because love feels dangerous. It wakes up the part of them that remembers being abandoned, shamed, or let down when they needed someone the most. But when they're serious about you, when you've earned their trust, something remarkable happens. They feel that fear rising, and instead of running, they pause. They breathe. They ground themselves. They come back. Not because the fear is gone, but because you are worth walking through it. You won't always see the battle they're fighting inside, but you'll feel the weight of it in their actions. They might hesitate before opening up and then do it anyway. They might tell you they need space, but come back sooner than they ever have before. They might admit they're scared, not of you, but of what it means to actually depend on someone, and then in the same breath, make the decision to keep showing up. This is not the kind of progress that looks pretty. It's messy. It's filled with back and forth moments, internal resistance, and guilt. But it's real. It's authentic. It's growth. And it's one of the bravest things an avoidant can do, to keep walking toward love while fear clings to their heels. And here's where you, as their partner, often become the grounding force they never had. Not by fixing them, not by rescuing them from the fear, but by holding steady when it shows up. Avoidants were often raised in environments where their needs were dismissed, where they had to rely on themselves to feel safe. So when you respond with patience instead of punishment, when you validate their experience instead of personalizing it, they begin to associate closeness with safety, not danger. And that rewires everything. Suddenly, fear becomes a part of the experience, not the definition of it. Suddenly, their nervous system starts learning that love doesn't always equal loss, that opening up doesn't always end in pain, that someone can stay even when they're at their most unsure, most unlovable, most scared. They won't say it out loud, but when an avoidant chooses to lean in during moments of fear, It's an act of radical courage. They might text you during a panic spiral instead of isolating. They might stay in the conversation even when their instinct is to shut down. They might admit, in a voice that barely rises above a whisper, "I don't know how to do this, but I want to try." And those small moments, they matter more than grand gestures, because those are the cracks in the fear, the places where love starts to grow in soil that never thought it could hold anything that vulnerable. And every time they push through that fear, even if it's just a little, they're building a new relationship, not just with you, but with themselves. They're proving to their own heart that maybe they're not too broken to be loved. Maybe they don't have to be perfect to be chosen. Maybe, just maybe, love doesn't have to hurt. Control is the avoidance armor. It's the safety net they've carried through life, woven from self-reliance, routine, distance, and predictability. It's not about being bossy or manipulative. For them, control equals survival. Because underneath that polished exterior of independence is a deep, often hidden fear. If they're not in charge of their environment, their emotions, their relationships, they'll get hurt. Again. And the worst part? That hurt won't just come from others. It'll come from needing others, from letting someone get close enough to matter. To truly care about someone means giving up a part of that control, and that's terrifying. But when an avoidant becomes serious about you, when they stop seeing you as a threat and start seeing you as home, something begins to shift. Slowly, uncomfortably, but undeniably, they start letting go of control, not because they're suddenly fearless, but because they want you more than they want to feel safe. This is not some sudden transformation where they wake up one morning and say, "I'm ready to surrender." No. It happens in micro moments that often go unnoticed if you don't know what to look for. It's the moment they let you make the plan instead of needing everything to go their way. It's them asking for help, even though their inner critic is screaming that asking makes them weak. It's them showing up to an event they normally would have bailed on simply because you wanted to be there together. These might seem like small, almost meaningless shifts, but for someone whose nervous system is wired to stay in control as a form of emotional protection, these are massive, seismic acts of trust. What they're really saying in those moments is, "I trust you enough to loosen my grip. I trust this connection enough to stop running the show all the time." You'll start to notice their edges softening. The rigidity in their tone, the my way or no way energy, begins to fade. Not completely, not instantly, but enough to feel it. They begin to realize that giving up control doesn't always end in chaos. That compromise doesn't mean sacrifice. That allowing you in doesn't mean they're losing themselves. And for the first time, they start tasting the freedom of connection, the kind that doesn't chain them down, but actually sets them free in a way solitude never could. The version of freedom they've been chasing, one where no one can hurt them, begins to evolve into a new kind of freedom, the freedom to be loved without needing to control the terms. And the irony? The more serious they are about you, the more that need for control gets challenged, because you matter. And when someone matters to an avoidant, the relationship becomes less about self-protection and more about preservation. They begin to realize that their need for control is now standing in the way of something that could actually heal them. But letting go isn't comfortable. It's shaky. It comes with 100 internal alarms. So when they do start surrendering pieces of control, letting you into their process, letting you help them make decisions, letting you into the chaos they usually hide, it's not passive. It's intentional. It's the result of deep emotional wrestling that usually looks something like, if I let go, will I be okay? Will they still respect me? Will I still be enough? And here's where the shift becomes obvious. The things they used to guard with white-knuckled intensity, their time, their space, their emotions, slowly start becoming shared. Not demanded, not forced, but offered. They'll begin to include you in things they used to keep separate. Their routines, their inner world, their future plans. You might hear them say something like, "What do you think I should do?" Or, "Let's decide together." Those words might sound normal coming from anyone else, but from an avoidant, they're monumental, because what they're doing, whether they realize it or not, is breaking the lifelong belief that closeness means loss of autonomy, that love equals control, that being in a relationship means giving up who they are, and instead they start discovering something different, that in the right relationship, they don't have to hold everything alone. That love, when it's real, expands them instead of shrinking them. That surrendering control in small, meaningful ways actually brings more peace than anxiety. One of the most gut-wrenching experiences in loving an avoidant partner is this. You keep trying to give love, and they keep finding ways to dodge it. Not because they don't want to be loved, not because they don't care about you, but because love, real, present, unconditional love, is the exact thing their nervous system doesn't know how to receive. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, being loved doesn't feel safe. It feels exposed. It feels like a spotlight is being shown directly onto the one place inside them they've kept hidden their entire life, the place that believes they're not worthy, not enough, not built to be held. So when they're not serious about someone, or when the connection hasn't yet hit that deep emotional mark, they'll keep the walls high. They'll deflect compliments, minimize affection, brush off your support with sarcasm or silence. But when they become truly serious about you, when the bond starts to grow roots they can't ignore, you'll notice something different. They'll stop pushing away your love, not all at once, not without resistance, but enough that you feel it. The slow, terrifying, beautiful opening of a heart that's been shut for a very long time. And here's where most people get it wrong. They think when someone starts accepting love, it's going to look obvious. Grand gestures, sweeping words, soft eyes, and open arms. But for an avoidant, the act of letting someone love them doesn't look like a movie scene. It looks like them not flinching when you say, "I care about you." It looks like them not freezing when you reach for their hand in a quiet moment. It looks like them letting you into their space, their routines, their emotional rhythms, even when they're unsure how to process what that closeness means. They're not trying to perform love. They're learning how to receive it. And that is one of the most uncomfortable things they'll ever do, because their brain is still wired to treat affection as a threat, as something that could turn at any moment. But when they stop shutting you down, when they allow themselves to be on the receiving end of your presence, your care, your consistency, they are rewriting their most deeply held beliefs about relationships. At first, the acceptance might come in strange ways. They'll let you bring them soup when they're sick, instead of insisting they're fine. They'll listen when you encourage them after a hard day, instead of rolling their eyes or brushing it off. They'll start replying to emotional texts instead of ghosting or ignoring them. These are the cracks in the avoidant wall, the places where they stop rejecting love out of reflex and start quietly leaning into it. And every time they let your love land, even a little, it's a step toward trust, toward safety, toward building something that doesn't just survive on logic and distance, but thrives on intimacy. They're allowing the possibility that maybe they can be loved and still be safe. Maybe they can be seen and not be judged. Maybe closeness won't destroy them after all. You'll see it in their body language too. How they soften in your presence, how their shoulders don't tense up when you walk into the room, how they stop holding everything in and start actually letting themselves be held. It might take them weeks or even months to believe the love you're offering isn't conditional, that you're not just going to disappear when things get hard, that you're not loving them because of what they do for you, but because of who they are, even in their quietest, messiest moments. This is where love stops being performative and starts being healing. And for an avoidant, that shift is like standing on a bridge they never believed was real. Every step across that bridge feels risky. Every act of acceptance feels like a gamble. But when they let you love them, when they stop throwing up barriers and start letting the affection stay, they're telling you without words, "I'm beginning to believe I'm lovable." And make no mistake, there will still be moments they pull back, not because they don't care, but because the old programming is strong. But over time, if they're serious about you, those moments of retreat become shorter. The rebounds are faster. The repairs happen more willingly, and the love they once resisted, it starts to feel like something they not only want, but something they can finally handle. They begin showing up to love not as a battleground, but as a resting place, a space where they don't have to be hyper-independent or emotionally detached to feel in control. They begin to realize that being loved doesn't make them weak. It makes them whole. When you're in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, the future can often feel like a foggy, off-limits subject. You bring it up and suddenly they shut down. Their body tenses. Their responses become vague. We'll see. I'm not really thinking about that right now. Or the classic deflection. Why do we need to label everything? To them, talking about the future doesn't just mean planning. It means expectation, obligation, risk. It means stepping into a territory where things can fall apart, where promises can be broken, and where their carefully guarded independence might get swallowed up by commitment. So they avoid it, not because they're being cold, not because they're trying to play games, but because envisioning a future with someone means stepping into the vulnerable unknown, and vulnerability is the very thing they've spent their whole life trying to avoid. But here's the shift you'll start to feel when an avoidant is truly serious about you. They stop dancing around the future, and they start inviting you into it. And they don't just talk vaguely. They begin talking specifically, intentionally, and repeatedly. This isn't about them giving you a polished 5-year plan or suddenly becoming a romantic visionary. That's not how it works with someone wired for distance. What happens instead is far more meaningful. You'll notice that their language begins to shift from I to we. Instead of, I'm planning a trip later this year, it becomes, we should go somewhere together. Instead of, I'm thinking of moving, it becomes, what would it be like if we found a place together? These subtle changes in language might seem small on the surface, but for someone avoidant, they're radical. Because what they're doing in those moments is letting you into a space they once believed had to be protected at all costs. Their future, their plans, their world. And they're no longer holding the door shut with one hand while loving you with the other. They're opening the door slowly, cautiously, but deliberately, and inviting you to step inside. And this kind of future talk isn't just about words. It's about action. They start syncing with you in practical ways. They ask what your goals are, not to judge, but to include. They want to know where you see yourself because they're starting to seriously imagine how your path could align with theirs. They start bringing up things they once avoided, meeting family, combining responsibilities, even long-term commitments like living together or raising a family. Again, this doesn't mean they dive headfirst into everything, but they no longer treat those topics like ticking time bombs. They start facing them, naming them, even planning for them. Because when an avoidant is serious about you, they stop seeing the future as something to protect from you and start seeing it as something to build with you. And don't be surprised if their version of future talk still comes with hesitations. They might stumble over their words, they might backtrack or get quiet after sharing something vulnerable. That's part of their process. What matters isn't that they never waver, it's that they keep coming back to the conversation. They keep leaning in. They don't hide behind ambiguity or passivity. They take ownership. They move the conversation forward, even if it's inch by inch. And that's a powerful shift. Because when you're used to being with someone who dodges the future, who makes you feel like every time you bring up commitment, you're asking for too much, hearing them say, I want you there, or I'm thinking about us long term is like finally breathing after holding it in for far too long. One of the most telling signs that an avoidant is serious is when they begin to make space in their future, not just emotionally, but logistically. You'll see it in the way they start planning with you in mind. They might rearrange their schedule to accommodate you. They'll consider your needs when making decisions about jobs, living situations, finances. It's not just about saying they see a future. It's about living like they do. And you'll start to notice that you're not the one always initiating those conversations anymore. They'll bring it up, sometimes casually. Next summer, we should, or if we had a place like this, and sometimes more seriously. What are we doing long term? These moments are not accidents. They're emotional mile markers that signal growth, clarity, and intention. Perhaps most surprisingly, when an avoidant begins to talk about the future with you, they begin to relax into the relationship. Because the thing that once terrified them, the loss of self, starts to feel less threatening. They're no longer framing commitment as confinement. They're starting to realize that a healthy, safe connection can be expansive, that the right relationship doesn't erase who they are. It amplifies it. That having a future with someone doesn't mean losing control. It means choosing a new kind of freedom, the freedom to build something together without fear being the one calling all the shots. If someone with an avoidant attachment style is really serious about you, it will not look perfect, but it will look different from their past. You'll feel their growth. You'll feel their effort, and you won't constantly be drowning in confusion. So here's the hard truth. If you've been holding on to someone who only comes around when it's convenient, who never makes space for your emotions, who disappears when things get real, they're not serious. They're scared. And if they don't choose to heal, you will pay the emotional cost. But if you're seeing these signs, if they're starting to show up in ways that scare them, they're choosing you. Not because it's easy, but because for once, connection matters more than protection.